All right, we are digging deep into the sands of time to unpack the story of one of the most enduring and, let's be honest, just plain fascinating civilizations in all of human history, ancient Egypt. When we think of Egypt, this is usually what comes to mind. These colossal pyramids, incredible monuments that have stood for millennia. But that brings up a huge question, right? In one of the driest, most forbidding landscapes on Earth, how did a people rise up, not just to survive, but to build structures that would literally outlast empires? The answer to that? Well, that's the key to understanding everything that came next. See, the story of Egypt doesn't start with pharaohs or with pyramids. It starts with a river. The Nile wasn't just some feature on a map. It was the lifeblood, the very force that forged a nation right out of the desert sand. Okay, before we go any further, let's just quickly nail down what we mean when we say civilization. It isn't just a bunch of people living in the same place. We're talking about a complex society, with a shared culture, shared laws, an economy, and a common set of beliefs. And this is exactly what the Nile was about to make possible. The real magic of the Nile was just how predictable it was. It wasn't only a source of water in a desert. Every single year, like clockwork, it would flood its banks. And when the waters receded, they left behind this thick layer of rich black silt. In fact, the Egyptians called their own land Kemet, which means the black land, because of this soil. It created this incredibly fertile green ribbon in an ocean of sand. And the river itself acted like a superhighway, connecting everyone up and down its banks. It was, simply put, the perfect incubator for a great society. So, all this abundance, what does it lead to? Well, it allowed those early farming villages to do more than just get by. They thrived, they grew, and eventually they started to consolidate their power. Now, this didn't happen overnight. We're talking about a process that took 2,000 years. It all starts with these small settlements popping up about 7,000 years ago. Over the next millennium, they merge into two big, distinct kingdoms. You had Lower Egypt up north near the Delta, and Upper Egypt to the south along the river valley. Then, around 5,000 years ago, one powerful king changes everything. A ruler from the south, King Narmer, marches his army north, conquers Lower Egypt, and for the very first time, unites the two lands. And this was an absolutely brilliant political move. Narmer didn't just rule from his old home base. No, he built a brand new capital city, Memphis, right on the border between the two old kingdoms. It was this powerful symbol that said, we are no longer two separate lands. We are one, united Egypt. So, with Egypt now unified and powerful, all of that energy, all that manpower had to go somewhere, and boy, did it. It was channeled into some of the most ambitious building projects in human history. This era, what we call the Old Kingdom, is truly the age of the pyramids. Now, to really get why anyone would spend decades building a literal mountain of stone, you have to wrap your head around this one crucial belief. The rulers weren't just seen as kings, they were seen as gods on earth. This gave them absolute, unquestionable power, a kind of government we call a theocracy. And it meant their commands weren't just laws, they were divine will. And the scale of their ambition was just staggering. I mean, the Great Pyramid of Khufu originally stood 488 feet tall. For almost 4,000 years, it was the tallest man-made structure on the entire planet. And it was built from millions of these massive stone blocks, some of them weighing up to 33,000 pounds. Think about that. Each one quarried, moved, and set perfectly in place, all without a single modern machine. But who on earth did all this work? Okay, so you need to forget those old Hollywood movies. While there might have been some slave labor, the main workforce was a highly organized army of up to 100,000 skilled laborers. A lot of them were farmers who worked on the pyramids during the Nile's annual flood, when they couldn't be in their fields. And what's really incredible is that archaeologists have found their towns. They had bakeries, they had medical centers. These were valued workers, not disposable slaves. Ultimately, the pyramids were built for a deeply spiritual reason. They weren't just fancy tombs. The Egyptians believed the king's spirit, their Ka, lived on after death. The pyramid was an eternal home, a kind of resurrection machine, designed to make sure their god-king had a successful trip to the afterlife so he could keep protecting Egypt from beyond. But the Old Kingdom, that great age of pyramid building, wasn't the end of the story. Not even close. Just like the Nile's annual flood, Egyptian history moved in cycles. Periods of incredible stability,
followed by chaos, and then rebirth.
Historians basically break this huge timeline down into three main periods of strength. You've got the Old Kingdom, which we've seen, the age of the god kings and the pyramids. After that fell apart into civil war, Egypt was reunited, kicking off the Middle Kingdom, an era of art and literature with a new capital in Thebes. Then, when that too collapsed after an invasion by a people called the Hyksos, the Egyptians rose again, threw out the foreigners, and started the New Kingdom. And this was the Great Age of Empire.
And here's a really fascinating little detail for you. That famous title, pharaoh, actually only came into common use during this final great period. The rulers of the New Kingdom were warrior kings. They learned from their invaders, adopted new military tech like the chariot, and used it to expand Egypt's borders, creating a vast and powerful empire. So when you boil it all down, ancient Egyptian civilization was really this perfect storm of three things: the geography of the Nile that made it all possible, a deep, powerful faith that gave life its purpose, and the incredible, boundless ambition of its rulers to build for eternity.
Think about that. From its unification by Narmer all the way to the peak of its imperial power, dynastic Egypt lasted for nearly 3,000 years, ruled by 30 different dynasties. It was one of the most stable, most long-lasting civilizations the world has ever known. Which leaves us with one heck of a final question to think about. What on earth could possibly be powerful enough to finally bring it all to an end?